Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sports, and about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post game after just another performance by the Winnipeg Jets, where they're looking like they're in a league, maybe not of their own, but they're playing a lot of teams that they look a league above right now. And in a way, execution-wise, they got outshot. And yes, there was definitely, parts of that game that the Nashville Predators showed themselves well, but the execution just comes down to the Winnipeg Jets in this game, and they walk away with this one. I got to tell you, we're a little bit late right now, and we're a little bit late because Renny started the show and gave you one of the best Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent opening drives that you will have ever seen before, and he forgot to hit the record button, which is what happened for the very first KNR show. By the way, 500th KNR episode happening here right now. So you might as well bring it around full circle and forget to hit record on show 1 and then do it again on show 500. But I'm going to burn through. I'm going to hit the pedal on my Toyota Yaris, and burn through the Jim Pattison Toyota on Region opening drive here and just say the scariest part, if you are the rest of the league, when it comes to what the Winnipeg Jets are doing right now, think about this. Adam Lowry, Dylan Samberg, out of the lineup. Two of the top penalty killers this team has, if not the two top penalty killers. And yeah, they are dominating teams on the PK. Their PK is actually outscoring the power plays of their opposition. And they don't, can this get better? This is astounding. Gabe Vilardi, one of the best goal scorers on this team, really hasn't got going yet this season. Jonathan Toews breaks out on this night offensively, but before this had been a little bit quiet in that regard. Neil Pionk, one of the highest scoring defensemen in the league last year, who was way out front when it came to scoring at the beginning of the year last year, really hasn't got going. Josh Morrissey, not scoring at the level we've seen him do in past years. All this is happening. All of these players have different levels to reach, and the Winnipeg Jets are looking untouchable in a lot of games. I thought this was another one of them. That opening period kind of, the Winnipeg Jets get out up to 2-0 on you, and you got to realize, we talked about this. This is what teams were like, in years past. But if the Winnipeg Jets have a 2-goal lead on you, you're in it. You are in it. Who comes back down 2-0 from the Winnipeg Jets? So if you start out a game and the Jets come out flying and they put a couple on the board, you know that your chances of coming away that night are they're not good. And at the very least, you are going to have to battle like crazy to get back into that game. I know I was going through this is what made the Jets hard to beat in this game and this. I'm going to drop that theme for now, because all I really have to say is that the Winnipeg Jets right now are such a solid team. Their identity is so strong that they can beat teams with their identity alone and not have anyone have to really play outside that system. It's a special thing that you're seeing from the Winnipeg Jets right now, and lots of special performances to talk about. Connor Hellebuyck, great. Jonathan Toews starting to wake up. And of course, let's talk about Logan Stanley. We'll get to it, but let's just make sure we talk about Logan Stanley. And beyond that, the man of the hour, Mark Scheifele, ends up surpassing Blake Wheeler as the franchise leading scorer. Amazing accomplishment. We'll get to that, and we'll get to it when Ken comes into the show. But first, I just need to wrap it up, pull in the driveway with the old Toyota Yaris, and wrap up the Jim Pattison Toyota opening drive. And hey, this month the Toyota Get In and Go event is on now at Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent. Finance the 2025 Tacoma truck from 5.89% with up to a 1% loyalty rate reduction and a $1,500 accessory credit. But hurry, the offer ends October 31st. Visit Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent for a test drive. Okay, time to bring in the man with the best music in the business, folks. Don't have to wait too long. Here comes Kenny. Kenny, my friend, looking good as usual. Some people will notice I actually wore this not too long ago. I wanted to open the season with it because one of the Renny juniors casually said, and listen, you don't get compliments from your teenage kids very often in this life. So when one of your kids says, huh, that's your best suit so far, Dad, tell Frankie and the boys they're doing it right and that they did you up right. Well, you got to open the season on Hockey Night in Canada with that suit. So, hey, if you have a special event like the opening game of Hockey Night in Canada, say, and you need to be done up right, you know where to go get done up right. That's down at Vittorio Rossi on Corden. Loudly or walk in. Well, you could loudly walk in if you want. Just don't break the door. Loudly proclaim once you get in there, Kenny and Renny sent you. Ask for Frankie and the boys, and they will do you up right. Ken, a historical night on this night. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot of the stuff about Mark Scheifele after the last game where he moved into a tie with Blake Wheeler, but I mean, some of it bears repeating and sort of fitting, not sort of, just absolutely fitting that it's Kyle Connor with another just ridiculous feed on the 1T to Mark Scheifele for the big monumental milestone marker. Mark very humble again in his post-game commentary. No surprise, same as after the game in Philly. This is something that means a lot to Mark, and I think it's something that he's just very much a day-to-day person, Sean. I think he understands the magnitude of the milestone itself, but as he reiterated today, he's chasing Dale Hawerchuk. I mean, we know the Jets don't have their records back. Maybe they will at some point here, in the future. But he's also trying to chase down his mentor when it comes to the milestones, and it's still going to take quite a bit. I don't have the numbers. Mike McIntyre had looked them up here. It's close to 40 goals, and I think it's 37 goals and 116 points maybe to catch Hawerchuk. Either way, incredible accomplishment. 813 is a ridiculously high number. Impressive job by Scheifele, and as I said, fitting that it's Kyle Connor that sets him up on just an absolute beauty. Logan Stanley talked about, he's from the Kitchener-Waterloo area, same as Mark. They've trained together before, and he definitely has put in a lot of work over the last few years. And as mentioned, this is something that's going to mean more to Mark after he's done playing than it does now. Even though I'm not downplaying what it means now. You saw, the show of emotion when they showed the Blake Wheeler video on the scoreboard, Sean. We saw the emotion, post-game as a first star, clapping for the fans, raising his stick, all of those things. And I mean, it can be uncomfortable to kind of be saluted in that manner in the middle of a game where you're trying, to win and win the next draw and everything else. But, touching moment for both Mark and for the franchise. He's carried a lot of weight ever since, Mark Shipman called his name, or Kevin Cheveldayoff called his name at St. Paul at the Xcel Energy Center, and made the announcement that the Winnipeg Jets were back and that Mark Scheifele was the first draft pick. I mean, he's carried a lot of weight over the years, but he's carried it well, and he's on track to becoming that Steve Yzerman type of player, one franchise player. And this won't be the last time we talk about Mark Scheifele. I think 100 points is, in the realm of possibility for this year, Sean. And, he's going to eclipse 1,000 in the next probably 2 or 3 years at the most. So impressive feat by him, and, good on him for being able to do it at home and to be getting the type of salute that he deserves.
Hey, Kenny, I love hearing you. I love hearing your analysis, but sometimes analysis needs to go a little bit deeper. And no one goes deeper on the analysis than Sammy the Scarf when he's on KNR. So let's do it, folks. Let's bring in our guy who called the game here tonight. Sammy, as always, was a pleasure to be on the broadcast with you tonight. I don't need to ask Sam to come on KNR. Sam tells Renny that he's coming on KNR because he's got things to say, and I'm sure he's got things to say on a night like tonight here. You were down at ice level. Let's just start with the guy who is right beside the festivities that were happening. What did it feel like? What sense of kind of mojo did you get from the Jets bench after the Mark Scheifele record-setting point?
He has so much. Well, by the way, boys, congrats on 500 shows. That's a huge milestone, huge accomplishment. Gotta love it. But I was kind of looking down there, and guys were quick to get up. Like when he watched the Wheeler video, it was pretty cool, and he has so much respect in the room. Guys were really quick to get up and make sure that they enjoyed it as long as the fans did, or respected their response as long as the fans did. So that was really neat. It was a neat thing to see. Like for me, it's, I go back to his days with Dale Hawerchuk in Barrie. And, then to when he was picked 7th overall and people were like, well, what's going on here? And then, of course, the passing of Dale. And then to see kind of Dale ahead of him and Mark talk about it after the game, like there's still one big guy I got to get to. Like all of those things, how they've all come and tied together with Casey getting the assist and everything. That was neat. It was a cool thing. What I think I appreciate the most, though, is the fact that he sits back and he says, like, well, Dale's still the guy. Like, I'm not the guy yet, right? It was nice to beat Wheeler. He's my buddy, whatever else, the 2.0 thing, however you want to call it. But he has a bigger sight in mind. And I think that's a neat thing because, hey, there's only one guy with the statue out there.
So that's an interesting one. Someone was talking about it because we did a story on this in the show. But I never got to ask him this after the show. So I had a post-game interview with Mark Scheifele, asked him about, the feeling from this crowd, asked him about Blake Wheeler and what he would be without Blake Wheeler. He had a great answer to that. And then I asked him, about what this moment would mean to his dad and means to his mom. And he had great stuff with that. We didn't have any more time with that. What I would have asked him next was his response to a story that we did heading into the third period where I'd had a conversation with Mark Chipman. And knowing this was coming, I had asked him about the idea of him putting up a Mark Scheifele statue one day. Now, he laughed at that. And it wasn't a laugh like, oh, we would never do that. It was like he was genuinely caught off guard by the question. Imagine having the power to put statues up around the city. I mean, like if I had that power, Sammy would have a statue right over my shoulder here. So I felt like he was with me all the time. But he laughed, just kind of being caught off guard by the question. And he said, well, he'd love it if he did. And it's not hard for him to see. He expects Mark Scheifele to be going for years and years and years here in Winnipeg, which is exactly what should be happening. Everyone should expect that he passes Dale Hawerchuk. Although if you look at the numbers, Dale Hawerchuk in his time in Winnipeg, I believe, averaged 100 points this season. Ken was talking about Mark Scheifele hitting 100 points in the season. Dale Hawerchuk, I think, averaged that while he was in Winnipeg. So, there's a mark there for sure to be caught. But I never got to ask Mark what he would think about Mark Chipman saying that. So I stayed late in the room after he was done, after he took the picture with his puck. And I said to him, either go back and watch it or get someone from your media group to take a look at this, or to get you to take a look at this and see what your owner thinks about enshrining you for eternity in the city of Winnipeg. And Ken, you know Mark Scheifele from a lot of times that you've talked with him. Something like that is an ultimate honor, and he's racking up the honors as he goes. But what do you think these kind of honors are meaning to him? Hearing his owner talk about him like that, hearing the fans chant his name, hearing Blake Wheeler, a mentor of his, saying the things that he's saying. What do you think Mark Scheifele would say if he was completely unguarded?
Yeah, I think that, even as early as the off season or, on a quiet day, he's going to just think about how blessed he is and, how much gratitude he feels towards ending up in Winnipeg. We know, and there's the obvious tie-in with Hawerchuk, and he probably had a big influence, or at least some influence, on the pick that was made by the staff there, Marcel Como and company, on that day in St. Paul. And, just such a high character person. And I think I sort of touched on this the other day, Sean, but, I had this feeling for a long time, and you and I had talked about it before, but before the contract extension was signed, the co-extensions with Hellebuck, I had the chance to ask Mark Chipman the day of, in a private, one-on-one conversation when the scrums were happening elsewhere. I said, Mark, I've always had this theory that, because Dale should have never left Winnipeg, and we know the obvious connection, I said, was that a factor in ensuring that Mark Scheifele signed this 7-year extension? And he said, absolutely it was. Mark obviously had a tight connection to the early Jets and, was part of the Save the Jets campaign and all of those other things, but he knows that he has the ability to rewrite that portion of history. Again, obviously you can't bring, Dale back to be a lifelong Jet, but he was going to make sure that the closest person to Dale in terms of the mentorship plan was able to do that. And I think it was important. So yeah, I mean, Mark knows this means a lot to him. And the day that he catches and eventually passes Dale, that is going to be an exceptional thing for him. But he loves being part of this community. There was a time we weren't sure he would be a lifelong Jet, but after that extension was signed, Mark loves everything about, he's grown up here, guys. Like, let's be honest. Sammy, you've known him before I did, but I've known Mark since he was 18 years old. He's been in the league now for 13, 14 years. He loves being here. He's grown up. He's shown incredible maturity over the years. He had to go through some incredibly hard things. And one of the hardest things he'll ever go through is what he went through before Game 6. He's handled himself with a lot of, class and grace over the years. And, legacy matters to him. I know he doesn't like talking about legacy because that's, again, shining a light on himself, but legacy matters to Mark Scheifele, and he is very motivated to ensure that legacy includes, a lot of things, both personally, but more importantly, he wants to put a banner up and he wants to be there at Portage in Maine for a parade, because that's the best way that Mark can cement his legacy. He has, he's always going to have a place as the first draft pick. He's going to be looked at and revered forever, but he wants that legacy to include a Stanley Cup. And he's put all of his energy into getting himself better to widen the window as wide as possible.
Sammy, one of my favorite things to do, other than, hold on a second here. Mrs. Renny just delivered the headband because it wasn't in here again. I can't pass up this advertising opportunity for the folks at Myers, the people who will deliver to you anywhere in the city, all your health food needs, all your supplements, all your prescriptions, everything like that. Like Chef Richard was telling us the other day, just like Mrs. Renny delivered the headband, so too will Myers always deliver. And so that means it's time to stop making Glenn and Jonah wait any longer. Time for us to make this a Sean's Headband version of the Kenny and Renny Show. All right, Sammy, back to work. One of my favorite things to do outside of undermining Kenny on this show is watching you break things down on the national platform. It's even better when we get you to do it here. I got to get you to weigh in on this at this stage. I know you were one of the guys last year who was kind of maybe a little bit befuddled at the idea that Mark Scheifele was left off that Olympic team. I want your take as the guy who watches the entire league, watches the guys who are competing to get on that team. I want your take on the reaction by Mark Scheifele. Let's rewind this to when he found out he would not be on that team. A perfect opportunity for a guy to kind of fall off or get frustrated or to do whatever. What have you seen from Mark Scheifele since he was cut from that team essentially last year until the end of last year and the start of this season and give me an idea of how you think it positions him going forward for the Olympic team?
Well, he's been a man on a mission. And, I think the Four Nations thing was serious. Like, this isn't a guy who's lobbying for things, and he goes about his business and feels that his play should speak for itself. And so when that didn't happen with the Four Nations, and, of course, Canada comes back and wins, and it's crazy, and it's more watched than understood than people would have thought of at the start. And so, okay, right, that's cool. You're not going to make that team. But I think he was hell-bent on saying, I'm going to send a strong message as to, A, why I was not on that team, but B, you better consider me for the next one. So it's going to be fascinating here. Like, so much of what Hockey Canada does is based on what's happened in the past, right? But I think you have to be mindful of what's happening in the here and now. And no one's really gotten off to a better start than Mark Scheifele this year. Having said that, I think this is the kind of pace he needs to continue to play at or produce at in order to gain that consideration. I think there was a time in Mark's career where it wasn't so much that he was a defensive liability, but if he wasn't producing at an elite offensive level, that you wouldn't necessarily worry about leaving him off the team. And I think some of the details and the way he defends now, it's not going to be a strong suit, but it is something for sure that has improved to the point now where if you look at what the offensive upside is, and even if you don't play him in a power play situation, he's still going to have the opportunity to produce 5-on-5 for you. And I think that's going to be a real important element of what we see in the Olympics. Like, listen, guys, the Four Nations was crazy, right? The pace of the game, it made Connor McDavid almost look normal. Almost, not quite. And so when it comes to the situation of now having to go play in the Olympics, you're going to see a lot of games that are like what we saw in the Four Nations. But I think Mark has to kind of continue on this pace. And I think he has to be above and beyond what he normally produces at when the decisions start to be made. You get into that meeting in November that Elliot was talking about today and another one in December before they have to kind of name their group. So he's going to be fun to watch, but he's such a motivated player. I wouldn't count him out.
So, I mean, another thing, Sean and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, we know there's a ton of skilled players on Team Canada, but it seems like dating back to 2010 Olympics, Team Canada often struggles to find guys that mesh well with Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid. Don't you think Scheifele would be the kind of guy that could play with either one or with Nathan MacKinnon, just given his skill set and his ability to protect pucks along the wall? Again, he's played on the wing on Team North America with a little bit with McDavid there. Like, this is not just a guy competing for the 12th or 13th forward spot. Don't you think he's the kind of guy that could play anywhere in the lineup? I mean, not on a checking line per se with Cirelli, but he could play with a skilled player, not just be a fourth line guy under consideration for that as well.
I think that's possible. I think that transportability, that versatility gives you that option. But if I'm looking at Mark Scheifele, like, I'm probably thinking of him as maybe a third line guy who's going to just really be able to give you a good solid 5-on-5 minutes and probably play in the second power play position. And that's not embarrassing, and that shouldn't be taken as a slight. It should be taken as a positive as to how good Canada is and how many options they have. So I think that situation presents itself that, hey, you go in there and things aren't going. And as a coach, you're John Cooper, you can say, all right, this is a guy that I can, yeah, we took him as a third, maybe a fourth line guy, but this is a guy I can bump if I need to get things moving a little bit. I don't know, Kenny, if he goes in there and he's a top six guy and ends up playing with one of those guys. I don't know if that's the case. I honestly think that he's more of a bottom six guy on that team, and that's nothing to be embarrassed by.
Sammy, you and I had a great conversation about this in Montreal, and about kind of the depth of Team Canada and Team USA. And I'm not going to get into who was saying what or whatever, but I would say this: would there be a question in a million years if Mark Scheifele was American that he was going to make Team USA?
I would think not. I think not. But they're good too, though. Like, guys, like, they have a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Like, assuming Brady's going to be back, assuming Matthew's going to be back, and both guys look like to be on that timeline. And then you look at Matthews, like they have a deep forward group as well. Like, they're really good. That's why the hockey's so good. It's like, I think the Americans used to be able to throw out a top six that would be somewhat in the neighborhood of Canada. Now they're able to throw 4 lines worth of depth the way Canada throws 4 lines of depth out there. And I think you can probably say that about the Swedes. Probably say it about the Finns. If the Russians were allowed to play, you'd probably say it about the Russians too. Like, the country's, it's good. The countries are really good. The competition it's unbelievable. So I mean, again, it's not a slight. Okay, if he was American or Finn or whatever else, would we be talking about it? But probably not. He'd be included, I think, on those teams. But the other countries, they're really good.
I know that it was a dream come true for Mark Scheifele tonight to become the Jets franchise leader in scoring. And I don't want to be a dream crusher for all you folks out there, but I highly doubt any of you are going to be able to score to become the franchise leader in scoring on an NHL team. But what you can do is score a great rate with Cambrian Credit Union. Getting a mortgage doesn't have to throw you off your game while you focus on home sweet home. Our friends at Team Cambrian Credit Union take care of the mortgage part with their low rates. Whether you're looking for a new home, renewing, or making the switch, Cambrian is your mortgage MVP. They can help make the next season of your mortgage path easier and help save you money. That's what you call a win-win. Head to cambrian.mb.ca/rates for more. Okay, Ken, this is another hell frozen over moment for me on the K&R show. Julie Sue, who has been the most ardent Logan Stanley, what's the word? I don't want to say not for Logan Stanley, but has been requesting that he kindly be removed from the Jets lineup and maybe the city of Winnipeg for quite some time now. And she's been slightly won over as she says, I believe Stan has turned a corner with his game. If he can play like this for a string of at least a dozen games, I'm not sold yet, she says. But you know who was sold on Logan Stanley tonight was the fans who gave him the double Ken Stanley chance out there tonight. What'd you see okay, put it this way. Is this what the Jets have been holding him in the lineup for all these years, with the expectation that not only can this is what he would look like, but he can actually start looking like this consistently?
Well, I definitely think that, and the flip side of that coin, and Sam would know this, the fear is that he's going to wake up one day and figure this out somewhere else. So let's not ignore the fact that that's part of the equation. But yes, the belief in Logan Stanley and why they traded up to get him, all of those things are on display. And yes, it's taken longer than they would have hoped, and some of that is injury related, and some of that is stunted growth and development. But the minute all of those people who wanted Stanley traded, the minute he is gone, the Jets are looking for a big, robust type of player. Now, the problem for Logan, and he knows this, and he's owned it over the years, he hasn't played at that level, being physical, dropping the gloves, providing some offense, being a good penalty killer, clearing the front of the net. He hasn't done that enough on a consistent basis for a long enough stretch of time to solidify his job as a third pairing guy. Now we know he's playing in the second pair with Neil Pionk, because of Dylan Sandberg's absence, but he hasn't even done it enough to be a third pairing regular on a consistent basis who hasn't been either pushed by someone like Hayden Fleury or lost the job to someone in the last couple of years. So, hey, he still has lots of room to grow. There's work to do, but yes, he's the type of guy. Again, I know, Sean, you hated it at the time, but when he fought Wayne Simmons, having someone like that that's willing to go. There weren't a lot of punches thrown in that fight with McCarron, as we know, but man, that's one guy 6'7", one guy 6'6". Neither one wanted the other guy's hand to get loose because they knew it could have caused some damage on both sides. Logan's playing with some more confidence. I feel like he's simplified his game. I'd be curious what you think, Sam, when first viewing live of the season in the building. But to me, he's simplifying his game and moving a little bit better. But again, he's got to do it for longer. But again, good on Logan for joking about it and
Oh, Ken, I think you turned your microphone off. Okay. I think he's having issues. I will say this while I've got Ken in a spot where
pass the baton to Sammy here.
You back? Okay. Before he passes the Sam, I just want to say I didn't hate that he fought Wayne Simmons. I hated his reaction to a fight that was basically a non-fight. The celebration I thought was over the top, and it led to a long period of problems against the Toronto Maple Leafs that I hated it because he gave fuel for exactly what happened. I will never hate a guy for engaging in a fight, standing up for himself or his teammates. That is something that I personally hope is never gone from the game. Ken or Sam, did you want to pick up where Ken was leaving? I meant to take the glasses off, not those.
So I've watched Stan for a long time, and so when you're that size and you're kind of ahead of the curve of everybody in junior hockey, you create space for yourself. You can put up points. You can kind of do whatever you want. And a lot of guys who are what they are in junior hockey try and carry that into the NHL. And when you're a superstar player in junior hockey and you can translate that to the NHL, you're a superstar NHL player. But for most of the guys, you have to find a way to adapt your game. And it's taken Stanley a while. So the first point I want to make is I give the Winnipeg Jets a lot of credit, because there was probably, if you go back in their history and you actually knew someone who would tell you the truth, there's probably 6 or 7 times where they were ready to cut bait and they didn't, and they stayed with him. In the injuries and sometimes the healthy scratches and whatever else. Like, I've talked to Stan the various times I've been here, and talking to him this morning after the skate was probably the most confident I've ever seen him. So I asked him about his training. I know there's a comment there on the side here about his training. One thing he said is trying to improve the footwork and like boring stuff that I don't want to do. And the plyometric stuff surely helped his feet just be a little bit more mobile. He could always shoot the puck. He was always big enough that he didn't really have to lean on people or fight people or get nasty. Well, he's starting to get nasty a little bit. The net front, the battles he was having with Bunting, and yes, most players against him are going to be smaller guys anyways, but my goodness, he took a piece out of Bunting tonight and anyone else who came near the net front. But I agree with you. Like, he's playing a simple game. Instead of trying to make like this big, long, wide pass or whatever else, make the short support pass, get it off your stick, advance it forward, go north. When you get your opportunities to take care of, when you have to be tough, be tough. When you have to be nasty. And so I think, guys, and I might have been you, Renny, when we were talking this morning, is like, Shen has been a real big influence on him.
Oh, I thought you were going to continue on the point there. Hey, I agree. It's something we talked about in this show last year. And if we remember, and I get this, there was a comment by Nick Lynham here about the sweeping generalizations in a short period of time that we're talking about, small sample size. I don't think anyone here is saying Logan Stanley has arrived and it's here, lock it in, it's done. But I will say, to just not be a fence sitter, there were versions of Logan Stanley in playoff games last year that, and yes, there were ones that went the other way, but where we said on this very show, this is exactly why he was kept around, was for moments like these. Now, it's clear in his career that Logan Stanley has had some of those really big, massive moments, right? Really big, massive moments where it comes out and it's like, okay, here it is. And then it's quite often been followed up by, what the heck's going on out there? I'll be honest. I thought it was going to be really rough at the start of the season for Logan Stanley, because I thought he looked terrible in the preseason. And yet what we're seeing now is a little bit more of a version of the player that they always thought that he could be, and a little bit of that player that we saw in some brilliant playoff performances last year. I would say this. I think it's starting to become evident that as the year went on late last year, we talked about it. I think it was like the last 10 games of the year. It was all of a sudden like, okay. And it was, Sammy, you're exactly right. After the arrival of Luke Schenn, all of a sudden he started looking a lot better. So I would say this, the window of time that Logan Stanley, I think it's not doing service to what has been happening to say that it just happened in this game or the last couple of games or even one game in the playoffs last year or maybe a couple games in the playoffs last year, because there were a couple games in the playoffs last year where you saw that he went back to struggling. But I would say that the number of games that Logan Stanley is turning out to be the version that the Jets always hoped he could be are becoming more common. And those games of the Logan Stanley where it's like driving people nuts, that has created a lot of frustration with Stanley, not just in our chat room, but in the fan base as a whole. Those seem to be happening less and less. So it feels to me like this is a player right now where it used to be tilted this way, the seesaw. Now it's kind of getting to a point where it's right around here. The seesaw-o-meter. We should get one. We should get a visual representation of the seesaw-o-meter, and that will tell us where Stanley's game is. Right there you go.
Sponsored segment. Anybody interested?
And so that's what we will be asking for you for in the future, folks, is the seesaw-o-meter and where Logan Stanley's game is tilting right now. I think the Jets like where it's tilted at the moment, and I think if you ask them, they'd like where it's been tilted for roughly the last 10, 20, maybe even 30 games, if you include the playoffs, that Logan Stanley has played with the Winnipeg Jets.
There's some similarities, though. Like when Schenn was drafted, he was drafted out of Kelowna in 08. They went to the Memorial Cup in 09, but the Toronto Maple Leafs took him fifth and decided to keep him there. And, I was always weary about that because I thought there was a real good opportunity for him to go back. And then there was a point where he got sent down and wondered if he'd ever play in the NHL again. So he went and consulted with Adam Oates. And Adam Oates essentially, he says, saved his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but think he shared some of the things that Adam has taught him with Logan. You're first-round pick, a lot of pressure. You're a big guy. You had a good junior career. You've struggled in the early part of, just like Schenn did, in the early part of his career. Now Schenn's extended his life by probably 6 or 7 years. And I think Stan's in that similar type of position where, hey, I just needed to get it in the forward's hands. I'm a big guy, so by proxy, I have to be more physical than I've been. And when I get opportunities to be involved, I'm going to be involved, but I'm not going to go and be the 40 or 50 point guy I was when I played in Windsor. I'm going to be a steady Eddie type guy. I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity given to me. And I think the great benefit to all this is you understand now that he can play in that role. I don't think he's going to be able to take Sandberg's spot in that second pairing. But if you scale back his minutes and you go out and you tell him, do the exact same things with a little more bite, a little more vigor, a little more energy, because now your minutes are going to go down a little bit. You're going to have a third pairing guy who's going to be super, super effective, who that if someone gets hurt in the top four, that you can elevate him there. Pionk probably has a lot to say in all of this as well, in terms of the success of Stanley, because of how good a player he is and doesn't get the credit for all the things that he does. And I think it's been really, really helpful for him. So you have the Schenn influence, you have the ability to play with Pionk, which he hasn't had much of a chance to do in the past. And so, this is the best version I've seen of him in the National Hockey League. And, for Jets fans and for all your listeners and viewers, you got to hope he keeps moving in the same direction.
Sammy, Sean and I have talked about Jonathan Toews a lot in the first few games here.
Just hold on, Ken. Before you get to that, I just wanted to quickly say, based on what Sammy says, sounds like Luke Schenn may have given Logan Stanley a little bit of the Pristine Roofing wake-up call. And you know what that means. Time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake-up call at 204-981-6289. He's the guy you want down at your place to check out all your roofing, siding, and exterior needs. You could also call Pristine Roofing directly at 204-237-7663. Folks, you got to give your home the Pristine Roofing, siding, and exteriors wake-up call. You will be happy that you did. Okay, Ken, you clearly want to get talking on to the next topic. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have discussed it lots, and we'll talk about it more, but we don't want to have it as a daily referendum. But Sam, since, I know you've watched the Jets before today, but first live viewing of Jonathan Toews since the return, what were your thoughts on his overall game? And obviously we know he had 2 points today, but what'd you see at ice level from number 19?
It's funny, Matt Runge, our producer, at one point in the third period, he said, hey, Taves is sucking wind over there pretty good. And I looked over and he had a long shift there and a heavy shift. But like up until tonight, he was winning faceoffs at a percentage that he used to. You could see the guys really deferring to him in that last power play where they were really trying to get him the puck to get him his goal. He hit the post earlier in the game. But at the end of the day, like the kind of guy you're getting with Jonathan Taves is the exact guy you thought set up the last goal, where it's a perfect opportunity for him to be in a good shooting position. And instead, he corrals the puck, gets it across to Nemesnikov, and then Nemesnikov scores. So he's going to be a fascinating guy to watch. Sean, I know you talked about it in the broadcast, but it's funny. Scott Arniel wasn't going to say a word to him until after 5 games. And I think you could even extend that window to 10 games. I mean, the game's changed a lot since he last played. It just has. And so no matter how cured and how healed and how much work you put into it and all the things, the game is faster, more skilled, more depth, less impediments. Like all of these things are now part of the game, right? And so he's going to need at least 5 or 10 games to kind of like, oh, okay, this is what it's all about, and allow his brain to adjust to match what his physical capabilities are now to become maybe not the best version of what we saw in Chicago, but a version of that. And I think that's good enough for the Jets. I mean, you're getting a guy who's up front, who's honest, who gets out in front of the media, is a hometown guy, who's had success, who has Stanley Cup experience. Like there's a lot of things in the background that you can take from his experience and not necessarily have to have an 80-point guy who's playing first PP, first PK, and playing 23 minutes a night. You can get a scaled down version of that that's still going to be a very successful version for what Winnipeg needs.
Ken, I'll weigh in on this. I think you'll want to after that as well, because Ken and I have a lot of these conversations behind the scenes. So the thing about the Jonathan Toews sucking wind and looking a little bit tired at times, it's been an observation of mine over the course of these first 4, I guess 5 games now that you added in here. We've talked about at some point, because I had said I think he'll end up being a 55-point guy. And at the beginning, that sounded like it was really optimistic. And then it was pointed out to me by colleague Jeff Hamilton, well, isn't that what you should expect from your second line center? Which has kind of made me rethink the way that I've been thinking about this. Now, we know he's a solid defensive guy and all of those things, but the Jets have, they need secondary scoring. And so that's what you'd be expecting from the player. One thing I pointed out to Ken tonight before before Jonathan Toews put up his points on this night is I've found there's been some times where the Jets get socked into their zone, and I wouldn't say that they're running around, but they look like they just cannot get the puck out. That wasn't a hallmark of this team last year. It didn't happen very often, and I've noticed in a good chunk of the times that that's happened, Jonathan Toews has been out on the ice. So I'm not correlating and saying it's Jonathan Toews' fault. It could be entirely a coincidence, but I am seeing it. I am noticing that. What I will say about tonight was this was the first tonight where it became obvious to me that regardless of whether he's tired or not, Jonathan Toews got better as this game went on.
Yeah.
And that's what really good players do. They elevate as the game goes on. Smart players do that because they think their way through the game. They start to figure out holes in the opposition, and they eventually get to where they want to go. It would be nice if this was a sign of a player who's now getting to that level where what you see from Jonathan Toews is that big old hockey brain that he has starts to go to work, starts to figure out teams, and he becomes one of those players that gets better as the game goes on. I'm not going to say it's a pattern because it's definitely not a pattern at this point. And I'm not going to say it's the beginning of a pattern, but boy, oh boy, I do think it says something good about a player who missed 2 years, has come in, and on game 5 of the season is at a stage where, at least from my estimation, showed against a team that was stronger as that game went on, that Jonathan Toews' game elevated and his results elevated.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing about him, we know his results should be getting better as the games get tougher, right? I think you're going to see Jonathan Toews excel when it's February right before the deadline, March after the deadline, April, and then into the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, small sample size again. We know there's a lot of unknowns to be answered, but I would say in 2 of his last 3 games, he's starting to show. There have been signs and kind of things along the way, but 2 of his last 3 games, he's been impactful. And I would say this: that if you're Scott Arniel, important that he was impactful today in just under 16 minutes, whereas the other night he needed almost 20 minutes against the Islanders. So the fact that he doesn't need 20 minutes to be in all that time, and yeah, today that was more to do with penalty kills and all that time in the second period where there wasn't a lot of ice time to be had. He can be used on the penalty kill when you need it. Yeah, I mean, Jonathan knows that there's room to grow for sure. And I'm with you, Sean. The fact that, in a game where time might have been looking tough and you weren't able to get into a rhythm because of the ice time that was related to those penalties, the fact that he found a way to, elevate his game as the game went on. And I mean, that pass is just high level stuff. Sammy nailed it. Like, most guys are shooting that. Like, he's already in a very good position. He had the foresight and the vision. You know what's better than a one-timer from where Taves was? A backdoor tap-in where there is nobody between you and the goalie. That's better. Anyway, so high-end play there. And again, we should talk about his secondary assist is, you're going to get those once in a while. But, man, good game overall. We know that it was going to take time for Taves, but yeah, I mean, this whole thing going to be watching between patience and how long it takes. I mean, that's part of the fascination. And Sean, we've been talking about it often, and this is not just a regular, this is not just a local story. It's a national story. People want to know. There was tons of interest in Taves. Lots of really good teams considered bringing him in, and Jonathan chose the Jets, and there was a reason he did that, and he wants to be the best version of himself. Whatever that looks like will be determined. But yeah, I mean, I think that he is still continuing to progress, but at the same time, he'll feel like he has more to give.
Sammy, what'd you see from Connor Hellebuck tonight?
Steady Eddie, deep in the net at times, which is where he excels because he's so big. His ability to go post to post, like it's a very short movement for him because of how big he is. But he just keeps doing his thing. Rebounds, I thought early in the game, in that second period especially, were, but again, what are you going to say? Like, the guys, he just kind of does the same thing every night. And he could go out and, play 3 mediocre games and then string 7 or 8 together where you're like, oh, wow, okay, I get it. I get why he's the Hart guy and the Vezina guy. Like, no issues with his game. Listen, you're 7 for 7 on the PK. Your goalie has to be doing something right when your PK is that good. And yes, the pressure and the change and the personnel and all that stuff, but when you're talking PK, it's always the goalie. And so no doubt he was a big, huge part of that.
Ken, I think I've cracked a little bit of a code on. Sammy was just talking about going post to post. I think I've got cracked a little bit of a code on why he's so good at it. Sam nailed it. He's big, he's mobile, he's able to do that well. But what I started to notice was there is no chance of the shot getting into the guts of the ice against the Winnipeg Jets. They collapse. And what they do is by staying there, they shut down shooting lanes. There's no shot coming from the slot. There's not really shots coming from the point the way that they're allowing it. But what seems to be there and available quite often is that long range, like Sammy's talking about, that pass almost from down low, almost below the goal line, in tight, across Hellebuck, and then all the way across the ice that he's getting across the ice for. And so often we're talking about, like how he read that play and he got there for it. I'm wondering if one of the reasons he's so well able to read that play is because it's an understanding in the Jet system that, listen, that's the only guy you'll have to worry about. The guy shooting from the corner, he's not going to shoot. And we're not letting anything through from the top, and we're not letting anything through from the middle. So here's the deal. We've basically got everything covered up except for that long range pass across the ice. So if you're Connor Hellebuck, once that puck starts to go in that direction, he knows that he can move right across the crease and address the guy on the far side, because he doesn't need to worry about someone standing right in front of the net, redirecting it in between his legs or getting a one-timer right from the slot. He knows that's the only place to go. I think one of the reasons, and he's said this to me in the past, the Jets try and defend in ways where if they do give up areas of the ice, the one thing that they will do is it will be common for it to come from that ice. And if you know, like, the element of surprise is what gets you in the NHL, right? Like you just talked about it. Jonathan Toews passing rather than shooting. That's the element of surprise. Now it's just a tap into the back of the net, right? I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that's an element of surprise for other teams for Connor Hellebuyck, because he basically knows that's the only possible thing that could be open, and he doesn't need to pay attention to the front of the net because there's no way the Jets allow players in there to capitalize on that area.
Well, Stanley was big in front of the net. His net front presence was important in this game as part of that.
Sammy, thanks for being with us, my man. Appreciate having you as always.
Okay,
all
boys.
right.
We'll see you shortly.
Good
boys.
to see you, Sammy. We'll see you right away. Let's shut this down here, Ken. First, I want you to give Sweet Lou a shout out.
Right on. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin, at Royal LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's LOU@LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including this podcast.
And you know what? I'm just going to give this the Flame and Comfort Hot Take Award to Julie Sue, just because I know she's been hot over Logan Stanley over the years, and she got hot in the other direction here. If Julie Sue can be brought over to Logan Stanley's side, there's hope for everyone everywhere on getting through your differences and coming together. So that for me is the hot take of the show. And that's of course brought to you by Flame and Comfort, Manitoba's premier supplier of fireplaces, wood stoves, inserts, and everything hearth related. After 50 years heating up your world, Flame and Comfort has moved to 1465 St. James Street. And you will find when you get down there, it's one of the most impressive showrooms in Western Canada. You don't need your hot takes, folks, to keep that warm feeling inside. Visit Flame and Comfort, and we'd love to see you there. Ken, Johnson Group got you covered play of the day?
You know what? We usually reserve this for, kind of under the radar moments, but I think you just got to give this to Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele has had the Jets covered on a lot of nights over his tenure since he was drafted in 2011. Been able to put the disappointment of being returned to junior twice behind him, and become the franchise leader in points. So Mark Scheifele has had the Jets covered on a lot of nights, and today was another one of them when he pumped his sixth goal home for his 813th point. So I'm going to salute a guy that, this would have been a lamplighter situation, but today it's going to be a we've got you covered.
I'm glad you saluted him, Ken, because I'm going to go in a very selfish direction and hand the we've got you covered play of the game to outside the game to Mrs. Renny for going upstairs, grabbing the headband and making that happen, because we know we love hearing the music. And I'll be honest, the blonde wig, it's a little itchy on the shoulders in the background. So it's nice to have the comfiest of the headbands here. Ken, keg save of the game. What you got?
Keg save of the game for me is going to be the one on Stamkos, just because of the push post to post. Initially, I liked the save off Bunting. No, not the one that he caused the issue with the turnover, but the one where he was positioned deep in it. Sam talked about him being deep in the net. Bunting had a chance from the side that Hellebuyck's ability to be back instead of challenging, that actually allowed him to sort of square that puck up. That's getting the honorable mention, but I thought the save on Stamkos was his best of the game, but there were many.
I think you absolutely nailed it. That was mine as well. Doesn't matter what we think, though. Matters what you think. Share with us your hashtag, the keg save of the game. You're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. And our winner from our last show, that would be MDub27. M as in man, a dub as in DUB, and 27. You know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email. I will have the fine folks at the keg send you a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg. Each location finer than the last. Okay, I just wanted to touch this. Waiters says he'd like to hear Sammy speak on Matthew Scheifele. He's so good. Agree, he's so good. If you want to hear him speak on Matthew Scheifele, you just got to go back and check out the Kenny and Renny draft show, where he did an excellent job breaking him down. I've had a lot of conversations about Matthew Scheifele with Sammy the Scarf, a guy who was highly impressed by him. Waiters, you're impressed by him. So too was Sammy. Sammy was had said, I think, character-wise, I don't know. I don't want to put the wrong words in his mouth, but it was along the lines of character. The most impressed he'd ever been with a prospect. That jives with everything that I've seen and everything that I've heard and everything I've experienced. I told my story about running into him down at an NHL event at the Stanley Cup final, and it was him who came walking up to me to say hi, not because he knew who I was, but because he'd heard someone else say my name, and he just like walked up and was like, "Hi, Sean, I'm Matthew. How are you doing?" And it was just like, you've got this guy who is going to be, I personally think, Ken, that he is Makar-esque in his ability to move and his ability to navigate how he jumps up into the play. I loved to see what he was doing in that game against the Jets and in a lot of the other games this year, just how active he is and how he's not afraid to jump into it. And it's funny because he's so active and so noticeable up the ice that you're thinking there must be a massive hole left behind the ice. And yet it just doesn't seem that it plays out that way. So his timings and his instincts seem absolutely outstanding. You know what it reminds me of, Ken? I've told people the story of I called our main man, Brian Munns, had me come in and do color on one Winnipeg Ice playoff game against the Moose Jaw Warriors where Denton Matejchuk was playing. And the only way I would describe that during the game was it was like he'd get the puck, he'd skate it out of the zone, he'd pass the puck way down the ice, and then all of a sudden that player would button hook and pass it across, and Denton Matejchuk would be there. He doesn't look like he's got blazing speed. It's these guys who think their way up the ice, and to me it almost looks like they're teleporting. They're able to get around so fast. Denton Matejchuk as well, Ken, has been brilliant since he's gone up to play with the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's a Manitoban to be proud of, as I'm sure there's a lot of people who are proud of Jonathan Toews on this night. Up to 3 points in 5 games, as Ken mentioned to me in a text. That puts him back in the window of a 50-plus point season, like both Ken and I have called for, said that we expect. Ken, anything that you want to say before we get moving in this show?
Yeah, just quickly before we wrap up, and just because it was a theme for the first, 2 games, maybe 3, but impressive turnaround. And again, not that it was any huge concern, but Nino Niederreiter and Vladislav Namestnikov definitely looking more like themselves in the last 2 or 3 games here. Just an elite level pass by Namestnikov to spring Nino Niederreiter. We know Niederreiter played, for the Nashville Predators previously. They moved him at the deadline. Great fake. I mean, great. He really froze him. I mean, Sean, you saw it on the replay, but man, froze him on the forehand, and then just incredible patience to go to the backhand. We know how athletic that UC Saros is. The ability to outweight him to get around the pad on the backhand, incredibly impressive. That's high-end stuff right there. Another multi-point game for Namestnikov with the goal and the assist. I mean, that's an important thing to be happening for those guys. Gustav Nyquist, I think that's three assists in his last 3 games. He's starting to get in a groove. Another multi-point night for Nino Niederreiter. So again, those are important qualities. We talked about the importance of secondary scoring. Those guys need to get rolling. That was a great play. And again, smart job. Great. That play starts behind the net, Sean. That pass, Dylan DeMello breaks things up down low, finds Namestnikov, then springs him. So again, impressive job by those guys to get going.
I had something I wanted to pitch to you and the fine folks in the Kenny and Renny audience in the real time here, Ken. You know how we love to give like shorthand names for lines. I believe I've got a great one
Okay.
for now sometimes things aren't great if you need to explain it, right? And I'm gonna have to explain this one. It's like explaining a joke. Maybe if you need to explain the name of a line, you've failed already. I'm gonna need to explain this. But for
Okay.
when they're playing Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Nyquist, 3 N's
Yep.
on the line, I propose that we refer to them as the Ty Webb line. Do you know who Ty Webb is?
You got me. I'm gonna fail on this one, buddy.
A
Sorry.
golfer like you, I'm surprised. Ty Webb is Chevy Chase's character
Oh, sorry.
in
Yes.
Caddyshack. And if you remember, he goes around putting and goes, no. When he
Yes.
puts
Yeah, that's
he
a
just
good one,
strings
Sean. That's a
together
good
a
one.
bunch of N's. So
That's a
I
good
think
one.
the Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, Nyquist line should further from this point on be known as the Ty Webb line in honor of the famous Chevy Chase character that Ken should have known because he claims that he is a golfer of record. And
None of those guys were born at the time of the movie, but they've probably watched it. They probably watched it. And I love that, Sean.
I'm glad you gave me the stamp of approval. I thought I was going to fall flat on my face with
No,
that
it's
one.
a good one. It's a good one. But before we wrap, and I'll turn it back to you, I had mentioned this to you during the game, but great to see Diane Campbell Scobie today. Mother of Scott Campbell was in the building here, and she's a Kenny and Renny listener. I had a chance to meet her quite a few years ago when Scott came in for a game, and she's a great lady. She loves the Jets, and she loved being in the building. And she reminded me as I was leaving today that she still listens to every game. So, Diane, great to see you. We're thinking of you, and glad you were here in the building to enjoy that game.
Excellent stuff. That is. I love it when people say that. I asked Mark Scheifele about his dad after the game.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me when you brought up Scott Campbell's mom that he used to stop, always talk to you in the stairwell because he was just an absolute gem of a human being. And he used to tune in to the Kenny and Renny show. So one of you Kenny and Rennyites out there, that was Brad Scheifele. And we are also proud when we hear those things.
And one last thing from Diane, we saw the interaction with her and Mark Scheifele after the ceremonial puck drop. I joked with her. I said, "You probably told him to break the record while you were here." Mm-hmm. And she said, no, I didn't do that. But I told him how he reminded me of my other son, Brian. So a touching moment there between Diane and Mark there as well today.
Good stuff. Good game. Hopefully it was a good show. Good day to be a Winnipeg Jets fan, I would think. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in, spending this time with us. Thank you to Sammy the Scarf. And I would say this, if you appreciate the conversations happening in this place, in this space, we would implore you to appreciate and to support our sponsors who fight to keep the conversation going in this space. For us, that's Vittorio Rossi, Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent, Cambrian Credit Union, Pristine Roofing and their wake-up call, Sweet Lou Furlan, Myers, Flame and Comfort, the Johnson Group, the Kenny and Renny OGs, and of course the Keg. Thank you to them. Thank you to all of you. We are looking forward to doing this with you again after the next game. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.